everyone, and welcome to an episode of Cooking with Catherine. Today we will be making oatmeal macaroons from War Economy and Food with suggestions and recipes for substitutions in the planning of meals from the United States Food Administration in 1918. We will need 1 tablespoon of fat, I'm using butter, 6 tablespoons of corn syrup, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 egg, 1.5 cups of oatmeal, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1.5 tablespoons of flour. The recipe also says you can use 2 teaspoons of almond extract if you want to, but I'm choosing not to. So first, we are going to add the butter, sugar, and syrup. There we go. 6 tablespoons of corn syrup. Now we need to add 1 egg. There we go. And we are going to stir this all together before we add the rest of the ingredients. At this point in the recipe, I notice that instead of solely using sugar, the recipe uses both sugar and corn syrup, which shows that they were trying to conserve sugar to send to the troops in Europe during World War I. There we go. Okay. Now we need to add 1.5 cups of oatmeal. So I have mine right here. There's 1. And then 1/2. And we add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. There we go. And then 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. We have 1.5 tablespoons of flour. That's about 1.5. And then that's it. Now all we have to do is combine the ingredients. I also noticed that we used oats instead of wheat, which again, they were trying to send the wheat and the sugar and all those more common ingredients to the troops in Europe to help them survive. In comparison to the Civil War cookbook, I also noticed that these proportions are a lot smaller. I think that really shows the difference in families between the Civil War and World War I. They were starting to develop the idea of the nuclear family. So families had fewer kids, and also these families weren't worried about feeding soldiers because the war was in Europe and not on American soil like it was in the Civil War. There we go. I think it's combined. Now we just have to put it on the baking sheet. There we go. I'm going to use a spoon to do it, but you can definitely use your hands. It says that this recipe will make 25 to 28 cookies that are 2 inches in diameter, which again goes to show you the difference in standards. There's the oven. I set it to 375 because it's asking for a moderate oven. So it doesn't, again, give specific details about what it wants, but it's more specific than the Civil War because of the advancement in technology. I have a huge sweet tooth, so when I make this recipe, I wonder if this is the only sweet treat these families would have during this time period. I could never survive that. I love my chocolate. So it's really interesting to see what families had to give up to help their country succeed in the war and eventually win. This is very messy. When I was reading through the cookbook, I also noticed that there were restrictions on what you could eat in a week. So there would be a few days when you couldn't eat meat, which I found very interesting because nowadays I don't think that would work. But back then, the country was so united in the war effort that many people were willing to do whatever it took to help us win and bring our soldiers back safely. So I thought that was an interesting way to go about it by the United States Food Administration. And it ended up being successful. In comparison to the Civil War textbook, there are more complicated ingredients like baking powder and almond extract, which shows the development of technology and the progression of culinary arts in the 1910s, which really gives you an idea of the progression of food in history, which I find very interesting. Almost done. They're very messy. Perfect. Got all of them on the baking sheet. Now I'm going to put this in the oven for 15 minutes. I'll be back in a minute. I'm back. The cookies just got out of the oven and cooled off, and I figured we should try them together. A little crunchy, but they're very sweet and they actually taste really good. They kind of remind me of like granola bites, but sweeter. I really like these. I think they're really good. As I was waiting for the cookies to be finished, I was thinking about how it's amazing that cookbooks like this last so long, because women in the World War I were still making these recipes, and here we are in 2024 making the same recipes. It's really amazing how things like this are preserved and it can continue to be used to not only demonstrate history, but make memories in one's family. It's also really amazing how when you read this cookbook, you'll notice the emphasis on no waste, no food waste, which is really interesting because in today's society, there are more opportunities to waste food and instead of using everything we have. So it's really interesting to see how that reflects the difference in time periods. And ultimately, this cookbook really just inspired me as an American to unite and focus on unity because of the amazing things we can do when we are on a united front with everyone. I think it's really amazing how people were willing to give up some parts of their livelihoods to help America as a whole when World War I. Well, I am going to go finish the rest of this cookie. And thank you for watching Cooking with Catherine. I hope you learned something.